Hey there, everybody. This is Chris Vanini. I'm joined by Dan Kilbert. This is the Spartan Tailgate podcast. Uh, you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Vanini, Dan Kilbert at MSU Dan K. Dan, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Fired up. We're back to our Wednesday routine. Going to get it out there a day earlier, and the people want it.
Yeah, we want to try to do it more middle of the week so you guys have more time to listen to it if you want to, but some various scheduling conflicts have made that difficult at times, but we're able to get this one in and up to you guys Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about this week today. Michigan State football holds on for a 27-22 home victory over Nebraska to move to 4-1 overall and 1-0 in the Big Ten. But a lot of controversy coming out of this game, both on and off the field. Controversy in air quotes, if you will. But before we get into that, I just want to give a plug for 24/7 Sports VIP access. If you haven't signed up for that, you absolutely should. Currently have a deal where if you pay for 1 month, you will get 2 extra months free. If you want to try things out, you can also do a 30-day free trial for the annual subscription. Highly recommend that. You get all the latest recruiting news and notes and the best game previews around from Spartan Rocky every week with that. So you guys should sign up for that if you haven't. And I think it's definitely worth it. Before we get into football, MSU announced Wednesday that Tom Izzo had successful hernia surgery on Wednesday morning, and he should be back in the office by Friday, which means that the injury excuse train has already started going. Dan, what is your reaction to Tom Izzo's hernia?
For the season to start because they've had their proper weird off-season injury.
And once that season starts, if it's a slow start, we know Izzo can talk about needing to get back into game shape and whatnot. In other basketball news, if you didn't know, Midnight Madness is the night before the Michigan game, so that's October 24th, I believe, at Breslin Center. So if you're interested and didn't know, there you go.
Might actually be bigger than the football game at this point. When
you
you look
never know.
whenever it's talking about the Michigan State schedule down the road, it's like Michigan's completely overlooked now. It's like they got to play Ohio State, and then who knows what happens from there. But
you and I
weird.
You and I talked about this a little bit earlier. That'll probably still be a 3:30 game. They haven't announced the time yet, but you figure that's going to be a 3:30 game, if only because there's not a whole lot of good games that day. And this game usually only gets relegated to BTN if both teams are bad.
2009 was a BTN, I remember.
Yep, in 2012 also. But you've got at least MSU here who's in the running and draws the television sets, as Mark D'Antonio mentioned. So a 3:30 kickoff is what I would guess. I would guess it's on that in an ESPN, ABC type of deal. I guess there's a small chance College Game Day could be there. There's not a lot of good games that week. If they were to do a Big Ten theme, that might be it, because the week of the Michigan State-Ohio State game is a load of games throughout college football. So you throw in Midnight Madness, and I could see them doing something with that. I think it's a small chance, but I do think there is a chance if there was going to be a Big Ten. Or I guess Ohio State, Penn State's that same day, so that's another possibility.
Yeah, it's not great.
So let's move into this Nebraska game here. Weird, kind of just a weird game. I mean, it lasted 4 hours. You had the prime time. There was not much else going on after a crazy day of college football, so you got a good chunk of viewers. You had Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit fly up from Mississippi for the game. I think ABC was the highest rated channel that night for the MSU game. I think MSU tweeted that out. And MSU was it was kind of ugly. It was ugly on offense, but they jump out to what eventually gets to a 20-0 lead, push that to 27-3. it was a game that the offense looked really not great, but the defense was looking like their old form, and you end up with a crazy comeback toward the end to almost blow it. But first, the three things I came away with is my things that stuck out to me the most. First was linebacker play, which was outstanding. They held Nebraska to just what's that number? 4.0 yards per play, 1.3 per rush. Amir Abdullah, the Heisman candidate, was only at 1.9 per rush. Whether it was Tawan Jones, Riley Bulla, Ed Davis, Darian Harris were the main four. They were just making plays in the backfield and all over the place. They seemed really active, making a lot of calls, whether it was Jones or Harris. More active, I think, than we'd seen them at any other point this year. And you wrote a bit about Jones, Dan. What did you think of the linebackers?
Yeah, I thought they were exceptional and probably the big key in shutting down Amir Abdullah. They crashed down hard, and he really, throughout the game, never even was able to get to the second level, which is where he's so good. I mean, if he sees a hole and can get through it, then he makes that second cut, and it's where he really hurts you. But he just didn't have the opportunities to do it because of the way. Tawan Jones was awesome: 10 tackles, 3 for loss, a sack, and also running the show better than he has ever. As a middle linebacker, I think Mike Tressel was right on the money when he said he's playing with some swagger that maybe we haven't seen from him. And I thought, that was definitely his best game at middle linebacker, but maybe his best game as a Spartan. I mean, he was that good because this offense is really good, and Michigan State made it look pedestrian. And I think in the coming weeks, Nebraska's offense is going to continue to put up big rushing numbers, and this game will look even more impressive from that standpoint. But, yeah, a lot of linebackers, not only Ed Davis and Tawan Jones, but Riley Bulla is doing a good job out in coverage on Amir Abdullah twice. And he completely shuts down the wheel route on one of them where he's running with him the whole time.
The arch nemesis of the MSU defense.
Yeah, when you've got an outside linebacker covering one of the best running backs in the nation on a wheel route, things are going pretty well. And they rotated a bunch of linebackers. There were 6, 7 guys in there. They're going to be without one of them now for about 5 weeks, and we'll get to that later. But, yeah, they were very good. Thought Shalik Calhoun and Marcus Rush, easily their best games of the season. They were outstanding. And secondary was good. The whole defense really was outstanding for 3.5 quarters. And then you get the muff punt by McGarrett Kings. That changes some things. And they sort of, as D'Antonio likes to say, things sort of snowball. But overall, just an outstanding performance from the defense, and I think they really sort of started to build their own identity because the 2013 defense is still being talked about as how good they were, and can this defense live up to the expectations? And I don't know that they can, but I do know that they made a name for themselves this week and said, hey, we can be a pretty damn good defense too, and I thought that showed.
Yeah, you mentioned the long run, or the lack of long runs for Abdullah. His longest run was 9 yards.
Yep.
And some I looked at the box score, I didn't even really notice live. Abdullah was the only one to take a handoff, other than Armstrong, the quarterback, running. But Amani Cross, who hit MSU for a long touchdown run last year, didn't get a single carry. Was kind of surprised. Maybe, the way things were going, maybe you keep Abdullah because nothing's working, or maybe you try to change things up. They didn't. Long of 9, average of 1.9 yards. Defensively, whether it was Trey Waynes making a just perfect coverage interception down the sideline on Kenny Bell, perfect body positioning to go up and get that ball was a big play. I think it was it Davis who forced the fumble, the Abdullah fumble inside the red zone there that was picked up by Calhoun.
Yeah, it was Rush or Davis. I'm trying to remember.
I was
I think it
between
was
Harry.
Davis.
I got the box score in front of me here. Let me look. Oh, I got this right here. Where's defense? Fumble forced by Davis. Rush forced a different one, I believe.
Okay.
The one at the near the goal line there was Davis, who on one play beat the offensive lineman in their own snap count,
Yeah.
which was a crazy play. You almost thought he was offside. It looked like Jarrell Worthy kind of used to beating the snap count there. That was a strong play by him.
Right. He was really good. He looked like the Ed Davis that we saw in the Big Ten championship game, where
Yeah.
he was just so disruptive. And yeah, he was a monster out there.
And this was, we mentioned it before the game or last week. This was an offense that had taken it to really good MSU defenses, and
Yep.
for what this Nebraska offense had done through this year, for this defense to shut them down is no small feat. I don't think it's any sort of fluke where you think Nebraska doesn't have a potent offense or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. It's credit to what MSU was able to do defensively, because we had questioned them a lot for a few weeks, and they answered the challenge on Saturday. A position that didn't get picked on wasn't noticeable at all, which is a good thing, was that strong safety side with where Monte Nicholson got the start, the true
Yeah.
freshman, and Williamson also played, but they weren't beaten for any deep plays or anything like that stuck out, so that was a good sign
Yeah,
for
they
them.
totally eliminated the big coverage errors, and that was really, I mean, it was like MSU played that type of defense against the run against most of their non-conference opponents, but they just gave up a few big plays, and in this one they totally eliminated the big plays against the best, probably the second best offense they've seen. So that's I thought that was very impressive that they were able to bring that level of focus.
My second takeaway was short yardage issues. This kind of popped up a little bit in the early games, especially against Wyoming, when they weren't able to get into the end zone until fourth down on a drive. But short yardage is a problem against Nebraska. I had MSU at 2 for 6 on third downs when needing 4 yards or fewer, and 2 for 4 when needing 2 yards or fewer. And one of those was a 3-yard Langford run. The other was a pass to Tony Lippett. Something that has been a little bit of an issue, and you need to finish drives, because if you get stopped short, it kills a lot of momentum. Delton Williams, the power back, the guy you and I have been saying probably is or will be or should be the number 2 back just for those power purposes, didn't get a carry. Nick Hill got stopped a few times, I think, on third and shorts. Langford got stopped too. That was something D'Antonio talked about on Sunday, about kind of changing up how they're doing that.
Yeah, he just said, like, really he didn't realize that Williams didn't play until after the game, and some people jump all over that and say, oh well, if I guess someone said, like, if that were Brady Hoke, we'd be all over him for saying that, and that's true. Michigan State fans would be jumping on that quote from Brady Hoke, and that's why fans can be stupid sometimes, because that's not an indicative quote or anything. He's just saying, looking back on it, he didn't realize that all those. You got to understand, he's not going into a game saying we need to get Delton Williams X number of carries. I mean, maybe you do that against Eastern Michigan, but when you're going into a game like this, you play who you play, and if it works out that you didn't get a certain type of personnel in there, then that's too bad, and that was an error, and that's what he said. I mean, that was an error that they didn't get Delton Williams in there, but it's not like he's totally lost out there. I mean, that's something where they thought Langford was running the ball well, and I agree with that, and then he has the fumble, and Nick Hill comes in. Nick Hill, I mean, we've talked about him a lot. He runs hard. You can't ask much more of him, but he has his physical limitations. And so Dave Warner, I talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, absolutely. I screwed up the play calling in the fourth quarter. There's a lot of things I'd like to have back from a time management perspective, and we'd also like to get Delton Williams in the game more. And I think we're going to see that, and it's just a situation where they didn't realize that maybe he was their best option at the time, because I think he was, and I don't think they'll make that mistake again.
I will say it all starts up front, though, too. I mean, it's not just on the running backs.
No doubt.
The line's got to make holes, and while they've done a good job of keeping Connor Cook on his feet, pass protection wise, run blocking wise, they still haven't been all that great, and it shows in the short yardage. They've had to move.
Pass protection was excellent, though. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was about as well as they've pass blocked in years. I mean, that was truly Cook barely got touched.
And those are some really good defensive linemen.
Absolutely. So I thought, pass protection, they were phenomenal. That was a great job from the front five.
Yeah, but running has been a bit of an issue this year, and they've had guys kind of move in and out. Jack Allen, Connor Cruz. There was one short yardage play blown up. I know they had Clark lined up at right tackle and Price at tight end beside him, and I think it was a defensive end split them and stopped someone on the short yardage play. So it's all about MSU's been doing more zone blocking in its running scheme this year. And I'm wondering if that has anything to do with some short yardage issues where you kind of are just getting a guy there as opposed to being matched up with one guy. I haven't looked at enough short yardage tape to know if that's the case. It's just something I'm wondering, because they have been doing some more zone running this year, especially against Nebraska, a team.
But at the end of the day, too, I mean, Langford still has 111 yards, and I know Mike Griffith from MLive is on this anti-Jeremy Langford campaign, and I just don't understand. He thinks he's not the best running back on the roster, and he goes, he seems to think it's Delton Williams or Madre London. And I'll talk to him about him. I'll talk to him about this week and tell him we mentioned this on the podcast. I don't want it to be like I'm calling him out, behind his back or anything.
He should listen to it and tweet it out and get more viewers here.
There you go. But yeah, I don't get it. I think Langford, he was hurt early in the season. Now he's coming on, and he got some really tough yards. And maybe this goes back to what you were saying about the blocking not being great, but there were times when he was getting 3 and 4 yards out of carries that could have been, 0 or 1 yards, and that's huge for an offense. Yeah,
he started out slow, but then I think probably about second quarter he's falling forward, he's picking up yards every time. He got that 31-yard touchdown run, and he seemed to get in a good running rhythm there. He only averaged 3.8 yards for the game, which isn't great, but he's the best. He's the best running back on the team, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, 8 straight Big Ten games with 100 yards for Langford. I believe that's what they said on ESPN.
How many?
I think it was 8 straight.
I think it's 9. Well, I thought it'd be 9. I think I believe he had 100 in the Big Ten championship game, and that got it to 8 in a row. So maybe they're not counting the championship game. Yeah. So it'd be like 8 regular season Big Ten games in a row with 100 yards, and 9 overall Big Ten games, because he didn't have it in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and on 29 carries, 3.8 per carry is not great, but that wasn't good.
He's in my opinion, he's probably he's the 4th best running back in the Big Ten, right? I mean, you look at Gordon, Coleman, and Abdullah, and then Langford, and no one's saying he's a Heisman Trophy candidate, but he's a damn good running back, and if you're that critical of him, I think you're just trying to stir up controversy.
And that kind of goes into the last takeaway I had, which was the offense never got in just any sort of rhythm. I mean, Langford was at 3.8 per carry. Cook was 11 for 29 with an interception. Some ugly numbers. He threw an interception. I was on the first drive when he was bouncing around, throwing off his back feet.
Oh yeah, that was a bad pick.
Ball hits a defensive lineman in the head.
That was really bad.
His footwork was not good in this one. When he did have quite a few. The completions he did have almost felt like every one was like an NFL quality throw.
Right.
And those were when he set his feet. When he wasn't setting his feet, they were all over the place. And that's been the issue with him is his footwork. When he sets it, you see what he does, but too often I don't know about panic, but he sees the second he sees something, he just immediately tries to make the play with his arm instead of setting his feet, and it has cost him a little bit.
Yeah, I've said I'm not going to make this comparison, but I'm gonna have to do it.
Do it.
There are shades of Jay Cutler in Connor Cook's game. I mean, he has the big time arm, like you said. He shows very often that he can make NFL caliber throws and make throws that not many guys can make. He's daring, and I would say the one thing he has that Cutler doesn't is probably the ability to shake off those bad throws. And I wish Cutler had that, because when Cutler throws an interception like Cook had in the first quarter, you just kind of know it's going to be that kind of afternoon for Cutler, and you're sort of screwed. But with Cook, I mean, he throws that terrible interception, and we've talked about this before. He puts it behind him and hits Lippett on the big touchdown shortly after. And, I don't think he's shaken by that interception. It was a dumb mistake. He knows it was a dumb mistake. But he's able to put those things behind him and remain totally confident in himself. And I know the numbers weren't very good. Even Dave Warner, I kind of gave him an out. I was talking to Dave Warner, and I said, because he said Connor had a lot of throws he'd like to have back. And I said, well, at the same time, he probably had a lot of throws that made you go, wow, up there in the press box, right? And he was like, well, yeah, but we had receivers making good catches, too, on 50-50 balls. So he sort of credited some of the catches the receivers were making as opposed to the throws Connor was making. But certainly it's a little bit of both. And you don't leave this game thinking Connor Cook's no good, or I didn't even leave it thinking that he had that bad of a night.
His Heisman, for what it's worth, his Heisman odds remained at 50-1. When you look at the box score, though, it looks pretty bad. 11 for 29.
But did anyone leave that game going, man, Connor Cook really blew it? I don't think so. I think he played okay. I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't. He
was way low on the list of storylines coming out of that game.
I thought he was decent. I thought he was all right.
And that you mentioned the tough throws or catches or receivers were making, and that kind of was another point about the offensive rhythm. I got the sense that Warner never really got in a rhythm either. I mean, there was a drive where Langford picks up like 4 yards and picks up 8 yards. And then it's pass, incomplete, and they're punting. And he never seemed to get the right mix of what he wanted to do, maybe. And obviously the fourth quarter, when you're trying to run the ball, that didn't stick out to me. When it's 27-3, as much as they started running the play clock down when there's 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Like for an offense that had never gotten in any sort of rhythm, I was surprised they didn't try to hurry things up if they got something going at all. Obviously, you don't want to blow it, but if you're at the time, it wasn't a blowout, and obviously you don't want the offense to cost you the game with the way the defense is playing. But
that's D'Antonio. That's not a Warner thing. That's D'Antonio has kind of traditionally done that.
At that point in the game, yeah, also. But you got at the end of the first half there, they call a timeout, and then it looked like they tried to rush out there and beat the play clock and surprise Nebraska. They did. And end up having to call another timeout of their own. It just seemed like they never really, at all offensively, never really anybody got on the same page.
Yeah, and I think they would agree with you.
And they still put up 27 points, which isn't bad
against the defense. Against a good cover too, that's given them a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
In recent years, and the press coverage from their defensive backs makes things difficult. And yeah, I mean it was sort of the offense had feasted on these inferior opponents, and they play a good defense, and they put up 27, and it's a little rocky. It's not great, but put up enough points to win.
But in the second half, when they're making those great catches, it felt like every pass that they were making at that point in the game was a low percentage, high reward pass, whether it was like 3 or 4 fades down the sideline to Burbridge. Like those are tough plays, and he made one, he almost made another, but I didn't see, Price down the middle in the seam or even a crossing route or an out route. Some of the staples of this offense, it felt like the throws they were making were difficult throws, and there was a stretch where they converted. It might have been the last touchdown, the touchdown drive that finished with the reverse to lip it. I think they got into third down, and Cook made an unbelievable throw. Then they got into another third down and long, and Cook makes another good throw, and they end up getting a touchdown out of the drive. And that's what Cook as a player can do for you, but they seem like difficult throws that they were trying, that Cook needed to make. Maybe those were his reads, maybe they were checks. I'm not sure, but it felt like they were missing those easy passes that this offense does. And in a situation where you are playing conservative, for good reason, at least the idea of playing conservative, you figure they would go with their bread and butter type of throws, I guess.
Yeah, but at the time too, it was kind of like they were playing with house money. And maybe that's some of the problem, that they're still considering it, not considering it a close one. But hey, D'Antonio said on Tuesday they were one more touchdown, they put in the second stringers. It was a weird game.
It was a weird game, and that gets us to the collapse, or the almost collapse. Now, like, every single thing that could go wrong went wrong in this situation. I don't think it was simply MSU got, they put the foot off the gas. There was a lot of things that had to go wrong that did. You have that muff punt. You have the drop pick 6 by Drummond as Nebraska starts attacking him with Westerkamp. That's a pick 6. It's right there. He just tips off his hands. You've got the where else is it? You've got
the penalties.
and the pass interference in the end zone, which first of all is offensive pass interference. Second of all is an uncatchable ball.
That was a brutal call. Yeah.
That was a tough call. And you've got the punt return on even Sadler didn't have that great of a second half. He line drives the punt.
That almost killed him. That was almost a.
What? It was a line drive punt. It didn't go far, but it was a damn good job by that Nebraska guy to get the ball. He's running in place as he catches it and doesn't run out of bounds, and then cuts it back the other way with unbelievable speed.
Right.
That was a tough play by him, but still.
But it was supposed to go out of bounds. That was what Mike Tressel, the special teams coach, said today.
That's I got.
It was supposed to come out of bounds. Yeah.
It was a difficult punt to return. I will say that, but it's another. Everything that went wrong goes wrong. You've got Langford on 3rd and short, running out of bounds, costing them 40 seconds.
We'll have to come back to that, because that was same old Spartans.
Oh, exactly. Twitter's blown up with Spartan. Here it comes, and you're just like, every sign is there. You got the field goal attempt, I think it hit the post and the crossbar. And you left a certain portion of your fan base very upset, because that would have been to cover the line, and it closed at 7 or 7.5 depending on where you go, and so that would have made it an 8-point win, and of course everyone thinks they're covering the whole game. And then Geiger comes out, and I guarantee you there are fans in the stands that can't hardly watch, just because they've got big money on the line. And it may seem insignificant to some, but that's a big deal for a small percentage of your fan base. And Geiger, ironically, on his birthday, which D'Antonio told us about this week, bouncing up the crossbar, they don't cover. It just sort of turned into a circus. And then you've got Armstrong fitting that perfect ball in down the sideline to beat Wayne. It's the best throw he's made in the game, maybe all year. Then he gets another one, and he almost gets the guy almost brings in a one-handed touchdown catch, and then he makes the error, and Waynes makes the interception. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong to finish that game went wrong.
Yeah, the Jack Allen ejection. I mean, that was, I don't know, those plays to me, like, you see those get called every once in a while, but you see them, officials let that go a lot of the time too, and for him to get ejected for those plays, I thought that was stupid.
I thought the second one was more worthy of a call than the first one. I know Nebraska got a call too on that, and a guy who was just kind of pushing on the pile. I don't know. They all of them kind of seemed to.
Yeah, it was funny. I was trying to figure out in the press box at the time, because you know how if you get ejected for targeting, excuse me, not ejected, it's disqualified, which is a much more distinguished sounding term than eject. He was disqualified from competition for the remainder of the second half. But so I'm walking around the press box trying to figure out if he then misses the next half of the first half of the next game, because if you get ejected for targeting, in the second half, you can't play in the first half of the next game. And Graham Couch had by far the most reasonable response when I'm asking people. I'm like walking up and down, like, does he miss the first half of the next game? And Graham just says to me, yeah, that's a great question, but it doesn't matter because they're playing Purdue. Yeah, I guess you're right. He can throw.
What was it like? Had you left the press box yet when the comeback was going on? Because I know sometimes in a blowout you guys head down to the field.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore because basically how it works is...
You can't really get on the field anymore, right? You just go straight to the media room?
Yeah, you're allowed on the field. So we do have... basically how it works is we're allowed on the field with 5 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. So, like, that used to be before, like, you had to have, like, an instant gamer posted. Like, that's what I would do. Like, when I was working at the paper, I remember the 2009 Notre Dame game, I'm standing in the end zone when Kirk Cousins throws the interception. For the Little Giants play in 2010, I'm right on the...
I was down there for the Rocket play.
Yeah, it's great because you get more color, you get everything that's going on, you talk to players that are coming off the field, and it's awesome. But with these tight deadlines and having to post stuff right after, it's not feasible anymore.
The things we sacrifice for you readers don't go on the field anymore.
Unbelievable. But yeah, no, like
how was that getting ready to rewrite that gamer? Man, those are the worst. Like, if you're covering baseball and a 5-run ninth happens and you're just like, how were you guys panicking?
Oh man, I had the most beautiful game story ever written.
That's usually how it goes too.
With about 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, man, that was a thing. I had a work of art on my laptop, and then it's all gone.
And people will never get to read it.
No, that was like I said. When Jabari Parker committed to Duke, I said I hope somewhere some child in a third world country is enjoying my Jabari Parker to MSU story. But yeah, it is. It sucks. Like, I had to rewrite the whole thing because you look back and it's like the whole tone changes, and maybe that's a lesson learned that you shouldn't do that, but you kind of have to. And in some cases you feel comfortable doing it, and every once in a while it comes back to bite you, and that was the case on Saturday.
Especially the writers who have to send stuff through editors and stuff like that. Tom Gage, Tigers writer for the Detroit News, he'll talk about all the no-hitter stories that he has written that end up getting broken up. I imagine those would be fun to go back through and read.
Absolutely. Who was the guy? The Jim Joyce. Who was that?
Galarraga,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because like when I write for MLB.com, you got to get your story in with a full inning to go. So that's when, if there's a comeback in the ninth, you kind of got to scramble because you got to get right down to the clubhouse after. So it's a hard knock life for media, for certain. Not really. Something noticeable throughout this collapse was the barren of bleachers in the student section and elsewhere throughout the crowd. When the game's 27-3, Okay, and it starts this whole big deal about fans not being there and staying. And I'll say this: whenever I go to any game as a fan, I almost always stay to the end, whether it's a blowout, whatever. It's a special event. You paid your money to get something. You might as well get everything out of it you can. I've sat through rainy, cold football games, blowouts, whatever. I also understand why people would leave. You've paid your money. You can do whatever you want. Some of you have a long drive home. It was a blowout. The team had checked out. It's cold. The game was taking 4 hours. Totally understandable why people would leave. I don't think this student section controversy or even fan thing is a huge deal because, for one, they're paying. You've made the money, and two, they pretty much showed up. It's not like, from what I had seen and read, the student section was probably 85% full, at its max for the Nebraska game. So they did show up. They just left. And I think that's a different issue for an athletic department than them not showing up at all, which has been a problem for MSU in the past and is for lower quality games.
Well, you look at Illinois student section. I mean,
the 30 people that they get.
There's nobody there. Yeah, and I'm going to take a different approach to this. I almost view it as a sign of respect that you've got a fourth quarter lead and people now believe that you will win that game, and so they're ready to take off. Whereas in the past, you got a 17-point lead on Michigan in the fourth quarter. You're blowing Notre Dame out in the first half in 2006, and people almost expect things to go wrong. I almost view this as a sign that Michigan State has come a long way when the fans are leaving and say, hey, they're going to finish this out no matter what. And I mean, I totally get for the people that are, in the, I guess, in the Breslin, they'd be called the green seaters, but the non-students in the student section, hey man, you got an hour and 45-minute drive to Farmington, and then you got to be up at 7 a.m. for your kid's soccer game in Ferndale the next morning. I mean, yeah, get the hell out of there. I understand it. And I also understand D'Antonio and Hollis after the game, the way it worked out, saying this is becoming a problem. In the student section, I mean, that's a whole different issue.
Which we'll talk about in a minute.
We talk about it right now. Do we have anything else to go over?
I mean, that's kind of, I guess it's all kind of tied together.
Yeah, I mean, the students, to me, it's like, it's not, there's no other excuse other than they wanted to be somewhere else. It's not, I've heard people say, well, the in-home viewing experience is so great. No, these kids weren't going home
they're not
go back to their house and watch. They're going to the bar or they're going to the party on Gunson or whatever it may be. And I get that. I mean, look, if Michigan State holds on and wins 27-3, nobody's talking about this. It's a blowout game, and people leave early. So I think, student section, yeah, they probably have too many seats. But in the defense of the students, it is a pain in the ass to go in there. I remember when I was a student, to get there, you got to get there an hour and a half early to get lower bowl, and you're waiting in line forever. It's like you're going through airport security when you go into the game, and it sucks. I mean, I get it. So I don't know. I mean, there's no easy fix. I think, generationally, yeah, these kids, when I was a student, we didn't have smartphones, so there was no way you weren't distracted the whole game looking at Twitter or whatever. Yeah, exactly. But we went to the hoedown afterwards. But it's just different. Hey, man, kids today are different. Just like we were different than the group that came before us.
I also get a sense that at MSU, it isn't as much of a football games are not as much of a cultural, social event as they are at some other schools. At other schools, everybody and their friends get tickets. They don't care about football at all, but they go to the game, and you just sit with your friends, and it's just what everybody does. It's just not really the case at MSU, and there's nothing wrong with that because forever the team sucked. and
Yeah.
there was no reason to go. But you look at a place like Penn State, which doesn't fill it, but they still get a huge crowd. Michigan up until the past maybe 4 or 5 years, but they used to always be there, and everybody just goes. It's just what you do. It's just not the case at MSU, and there's nothing wrong with that because, like I said, there was no reason for it to be. And although MSU is winning now, it's harder to develop a culture in today's world where there's so many different things to do. It's hard to make going to a game a social thing for our generation, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do think it needs to be cut, but you also have to make sure that the people you're keeping are the people who want to be there and not the people who only buy tickets to sell them for every single game on all MSU or something like that. And the way I would fix it, I don't think assigned seating works, because if you got a bad seat, why would you? That decreases your want. There has to be an incentive for those who want to get there early, and that's what the general assignment seating is. When I was a student, I went to one game in the front row. It was my last game. So I'm going to get up at like 3 in the morning and go get front row for one game just to do it. And it was a good time. The way I would do it is this. They scan the IDs. They should know who's showing up and who's not. The ones who show up consistently next year, give them a pre-sale for student section football tickets. So the people who really want to go can get their tickets, and then you open it up to everybody else. That way, there's still incentive for maybe that casual fan, and you cut out the upper deck.
Yeah.
It's been a problem for a long time because it's literally you've got tiered groups there. I mean, it used to be funny when they'd tie all the towels together and dip them down and to the lower bowl, but cut out the upper deck, sell those to whoever you want to, make more money that way anyway. And then, like I said, do a pre-sale and then open it up. That way you're shrinking the section and you're keeping the people that want to be there, and you still have the ability to develop a culture for those people that want to go. That's how I would solve it. I don't think assigned seating will do anything. I don't think simply cutting will do anything, because then you don't want to price out people, because there will be people who maybe are unable to get tickets and want to go to games, and their only way to go is through all MSU or something like that, and they have to overpay for games. So that's how I would do it. Cut out the upper deck, pre-sale for the people who show up. Because if you do any sort of priority seating, look at the upper deck Izzo. It's pretty much gone now.
Yeah.
And you have that not points-based, but that points-based system where if you show up to all the games, you got a good chance of getting lower bowl. Even we talk about it every year, how much the Izzo sucks, yada yada yada. It's not the culture that it was anymore, and it's not really the case anywhere for any sports.
No, anymore. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like you want this raucous student section filled with totally well-behaved, sober students, and it's not going to happen. Yeah. There's simply no way. You're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole when you're trying to do that. So I remember when it bothered me that police were walking through the student section at all times when I was there, because you're sending mixed messages. You're saying we want you to be there early, we want you to be loud, but absolutely, no drinking, no extracurricular activities. And I understand that you can't condone it, but a brown bag policy, maybe looking the other way every once in a while, I think that could go a long ways. Figuring out a way to get the students in quicker, whether it's hiring 20 more employees to work the door, because that was always a pain in the ass waiting that long line. So there's a few changes you can make. They're chasing an ideal scenario that's just not feasible. So what they have to do, to me, is reevaluate what they're hoping to get out of it. And once you do that and come up with a more realistic parameter for what the student section can be, that's when you start to make some progress.
Right, and it's going to be different than the Izzo in that way because you don't have tailgating for basketball games. So if Mark Hollis is listening, I think the best way to go is cut the upper deck, pre-sale for those who show up all the time, and then
let a
open up their
few,
beers.
yeah, and let a few things slide.
And let maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, kid's got a pint in his Timberline, his Timberland boots. Maybe you look the other way.
Yeah, we're not encouraging underage drinking though. That's only if you're of age.
That's right.
We're a family.
And please drink responsibly.
We're a family podcast. Now to the other controversy from this game, which didn't show up until Tuesday on the Big Ten teleconference. Clapgate, which sounds dirty and disgusting, and I don't like that name at all. And Corn Nation, SB Nation's Nebraska blog, called it the Spartan Macarena, which I think is a lot more suitable. So, Nebraska has a couple of snap issues in this game. What's going on? Bo Pelini says, well, they were clapping a little bit and it confused our center. And he said he would look into it with the Big Ten office. Okay, well, that's interesting. Mark D'Antonio, what do you think about this? You said you guys were clapping, D'Antonio says. We can do what we want. We have claps as to to move our guys. It's no problem. And Narduzzi had a great quote. Did you get that? Did you see that one?
About the we clap our butts. The butt clap. Yeah, I was there for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good line. I like butt clap.
Yep. And I didn't use it because I made a conscious decision to not write a single word on this stupid thing that started entirely with Bo Pelini.
You should have just written Buttgate then. That would have been fine.
that would have been better.
I mean, butt clap. Yeah, it was hard to tell. I was listening to the Big Ten teleconference. It was hard to tell the tone that Pelini was saying it with when he said he was going to go to the league office. Can't really tell if that means is he going to report MSU or is he going to talk to the league office about what the rules mean and adjusting his own players' snap count because his son is the center,
right,
or one of the centers. So I think there always seems to be like a weekly story of the week that D'Antonio gets asked about that has nothing to do with anything, whether it's Brady Hoke or whether it's a student section or there was something else earlier this year. Now it's this clap thing. I don't know. I thought it was kind of dumb. I know a lot of Nebraska fans were all upset about it, and it was like the tape of Ed Davis clapping or something like that. But Corn Nation didn't seem to think it was much of anything, but considered it more of an excuse by Pelini and any Nebraska fans as to
that's my whole point.
Played into anything.
That's why I didn't write about it. I mean, listen, if you're going into a night game environment with a ton of fans, you know it's going to be loud. If you're relying solely on sound of a clap for a snap, then you're in trouble already. And if that's an issue for you, the snap, because an MSU defender is clapping, then you've got to retool your pre-snap scheme, and it's stupid, and that's why I didn't write about it. I think it's a total non-issue, and I don't even like to talk about it. I just think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, MSU's done a good job of getting ahead on snap counts. Whether I know in 2011 Michigan game, they always knew when the center picked up his head, the snap was about to come, and we know what happened there. So yeah, Clapgate, Macarena, do your dance, whatever. I think it was kind of dumb.
This is about the only issue that could make me eager to get on to Purdue.
Yes, from butt claps to the Boilermakers. Purdue comes into this game with a 3-2 record, an interesting 3-2 record, or 3-3 record. I'm sorry. They got blown out by Central Michigan at home, but then they played Notre Dame really tough. They won at Illinois last week. They're 1-1 in the Big Ten. It's a team that, now remember a year ago, MSU only beat this 1-11 Purdue team 14-0, and they only got one offensive touchdown, and that offensive touchdown was thrown by Tony Lippett. So it's been since 2010 that an MSU quarterback threw a touchdown against Purdue because they didn't play in the 11-12. But they're going to West Lafayette for 2 straight road games after this is Indiana. The line is MSU by about 21. If you haven't, as I say every week, check out Spartan Rocky's previews. They are fantastic as always. As I'm reading this, he's got the MSU offense versus Purdue defense bit up. It's really good. Purdue defensively, they've got really young linebackers. They've been thrown on a lot this year. 5th most throws being thrown against. They're only giving up 27.7 points per game. Opponents are only rushing for 3.8 yards per carry, which is pretty good run defense. So it'll be an interesting challenge. I imagine MSU is going to pass a lot, try to open things up with different receivers, because right now only Tony Lippett seems like not reliable, but he's clearly the go-to guy. You saw Aaron Burbridge kind of step up in the last game, and on this week's depth chart, you had a lot more oars on there. You had Burbridge as an oar receiver with Mumphrey. You had, I think it was Kings and Shelton as an oar on the F receiver.
They've been oars though. That's been the case since week 2. I think that's been the case.
Oh, yep. I don't know. I feel like I would have noticed that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Purdue, Michigan State. What are you looking for, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking to see how MSU responds to a game in which they should win handily against. I think Spartan Rocky made a good point that, Michigan State, they've played terrible teams and they've played good teams. They played Oregon and Nebraska, and then they played a bunch of teams that are just dog shit. So when you look at this one, Purdue is just below average. They're a below average football team.
That's improvement from what they were. I mean, they are definitely more improved in the second year of the Darrell Hazel era at 3-3. I don't know if they'll win for the rest of the year. I mean, maybe they only finished with 3-4 wins, but they only had 1 win last year. So
it's like, did you watch?
And they've gone up.
Did you watch Arrested Development?
Not a ton.
Oh man, the Bluth Company is this this fictional, that's publicly traded, and on MSNBC or whatever, they've always been a sell, and then something good happened and they moved up to a don't buy, and they had like this huge party for it, like it was a big thing, like we're a don't buy. They were no longer a sell, and that's Purdue. They're no longer a sell. They're just a don't buy. So I think they should put that on the poster this week. That come watch some below average football in West Lafayette, and I'll be there. I'm leaving Friday afternoon. I'm excited for it. I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about this game because MSU should win handily. But basically, just looking to see how they respond, and I think Purdue probably hates the fact that Nebraska had that comeback, because if Michigan State wins, 34-3 or whatever, they go into West Lafayette and they're feeling great. Now they're looking at all their mistakes on film. They're being, they're being criticized for all that went wrong, and so I think that was bad news for Purdue. And so I'll just look to see how they handle that.
Yeah, something that stuck out to me, if you didn't watch Purdue, Illinois last week, it was a surprisingly incredibly entertaining game. Boilers won. And what was surprising was the amount of big plays. Purdue had either 4 or 5 plays of at least 50 yards in that game, and they didn't have a single play over 50 yards on the year entering the game. So it was an MSU defense that had been prone to giving up some big plays until Nebraska. So if they can, again, cut out the big plays, which Purdue hadn't been prone to until, Illinois happens, it'll be interesting to watch. This is Darrell Hazel used to coach with Jim Tressel. He's a very pro-style type of quarterback, type of coach. They've run the ball 218 times and passed it 205 times, so it's very 50-50. I'm going to guess, I haven't seen if it's for sure, but I'm going to assume B is the quarterback after how he played last week. on the year. He's completing only 56% of his passes, but it leads the team, and he's got 2 touchdowns, 2 an interception. Only averaging. They've kind of switched between him and Danny Etling, who's now a sophomore. Etling got into the game last year. So it's kind of, offensively, it's kind of your basic nuts and bolts. This is no longer the Joe Tiller era, pass it around the yard type of Purdue team. They're very 50-50. And last year, I don't know if they got inside MSU's 30-yard line or 40-yard line last year. I know they I think they missed 2 field goals in that game, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, and that's the problem. We've talked about this before when Wyoming came to town, but that's the problem here for Purdue. I mean, it's commendable to run the pro-style offense, and you can build on that, but against a defense this good with players that aren't up to snuff against the Spartans, it's just not going to work. And so I don't think Purdue is going to put up many points here, but, we'll see. Yeah,
so MSU's favored by 21. The over/under is 51.5. What's your pick for this one?
I kind of think Purdue covers because they play, like you said, they've been defensively, they've been okay. They played Notre Dame pretty tough for 2.5, 3 quarters. Contained Illinois. So I think MSU wins, but I like Purdue to cover, and I like the under.
You got a score? You want to give me a score? No.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to, but I will. I'll say Michigan State 27-5. Purdue's gonna get a safety.
27-5 is a 22-point win, so they don't cover.
Yep. Oh, that is. Yeah, you're right. That is a cover. All right,
you want to make that 7?
27 to 8. No, I'm sticking with the safety. 27 to 8.
And 2 field goals.
Yeah, I'm not a math major.
All right, I'll go. Man, I'm starting to. Man, last week really makes me wonder about offensively because of how the running game has not looked good this year. I'll say MSU wins 35-14, which actually ends up being a push. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll say 35-14.
Yeah.
It's weird how one game suddenly has me doubting this MSU offense, but it's a combination of the running game with what they did last year and an inability to move the ball that kind of makes me wonder because they did shut down. I know Cook wasn't the same Cook at the time.
I just think it's a tough matchup again. I think Purdue runs press coverage, and they're not a terrible defense. So I think this offense will continue to put up big numbers throughout Big Ten play against some teams. But I think this one a little more of a gut check game for the offense. But we've got some other Big Ten teams or other Big Ten games that are oddly intriguing.
Yeah, before that, the games at 3:30 oddly. On ABC/ESPN2. So if you want to watch some of the other good games going on at 3:30, it's kind of a weird. Sorry. It's weird that Purdue gets a home game at 3:30 on a. But that's what makes me think MSU Michigan will be 3:30, and that's maybe one reason why D'Antonio talks about TV ratings when they do or don't play into the playoff because MSU is starting. At least seemingly being treated by the television broadcasters as a scene.
Sure.
But, you talk about Big Ten. Some interesting, we got, 5 Big Ten games, 4 outside of MSU, and 3 of these 4 really, really close lines. Northwestern, fresh off a win against Wisconsin, sitting at 2-0 in the Big Ten, travels to 4-1, 1-0 Minnesota in a game that has very big Big Ten West implications. Minnesota's favored by 4. Now, I don't know what the hell has happened to Northwestern because they lost at home to Cal, who admittedly is now an improved team, and at home to Northern Illinois. And in going into a bye, and this team looked terrible, and you're thinking, the Pat Fitzgerald magic is over, and suddenly they are sitting here at 3-2, 2-0 in the Big Ten, and atop the Big Ten West, and Bill Connolly at SB Nation's Big Ten projections suddenly have the Wildcats coming out of the West. Analytically, statistically. I'm going to pick Minnesota in this one, though, because I think they really have an identity that is carried over from last year. You saw it in that Michigan game that they played 2 weeks ago. I'll say Minnesota. I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game. I'll say Minnesota wins it 24-14.
Okay. I don't like Minnesota in this game because I think they're a very good rushing team. But I think Northwestern showed last week that they play pretty damn good run defense.
It's debate. Let me pull up. Hold on one second. Let me pull this up because Melvin Gordon, the Wisconsin Northwestern box score is one of the weirdest things I've seen.
Melvin Gordon, though, he had a lot of his yards on that one huge run in the first half. He broke free for one.
He had 259. He averaged 9.6 yards per carry, and they only put up 14 points because they threw.
I don't care what Jamil Hill says. Numbers lie.
They threw four. No. Here are the full numbers though. Wisconsin threw 4 interceptions. They were 12 for 29 passing, 4 for 12 on third down, and they were terrible in the red zone. It was any lack of a passing game that did them in. Joel Stave doesn't have the yips anymore, but he's got a lot of interceptions now. He threw 3 of those, going 8 for 19. But to get that sort of performance from your rushing game and lose has got to be brutal for Wisconsin. So how good Wisconsin's rush defense is, I don't know. I do know that they forced a lot of turnovers, though, and they got the stops when they needed to down in the red zone. But
they've got a hell of a coach. I mean, that's what I think it is. You ask what got into Northwestern. I think it's Pat Fitzgerald, and I think that's why. I mean, I think he could be a serious candidate for that Michigan job next year because
again,
there are a lot of teams that would go into a tailspin after what Northwestern went through. You lose your, their best running back. You lose your best receiver, one of the best in conference, and you start out miserably, and then Pat Fitzgerald gets him going. And I don't know what he does, but that tells me that he is a hell of a coach for him to be able to get them back up because they had been in an absolute tailspin. They hadn't won since that big, huge Ohio State game in Evanston last year. And to be able to pull them out of that.
Did they beat Illinois last year?
They may have, but I don't think it was after. I do not believe they had lost since that Ohio State game, or won, excuse me.
No, I think that because they finished with. Hold on, I'm pulling it up here. They finished the year with a win at Illinois, but they had lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row, and then they had lost 9 of 10.
Yeah, so that doesn't really count. It was Illinois. But yeah, I don't know. I like the Cats, and I also think if I'm Michigan, I'm taking a long look at Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah, he said after they beat a 1AA team to get their first win, he said his shoe is going where the sun don't shine, and it's staying there for the whole year. And so far, the shoe has stayed there, and they've played really well.
Poetic.
Game that maybe doesn't have many implications, but kind of an interesting matchup. Indiana at Iowa. Iowa's favored by 3. Indiana's been a weird team. They beat North Texas last week. Iowa hasn't played since winning at Pitt 2 weeks ago, I don't think. I don't need to go much into it, but who do you got? Iowa -3 hosting Indiana.
I think it's a push. I like Iowa by a field goal. That's all I got.
I think this is going to be a surprisingly low-scoring game because Indiana's offense this year has not looked quite what it has in the past.
Yeah, I can see that.
But defensively, they've actually, well, other than the Bowling Green game, but they got some good pass rush against Missouri, so we'll see if that continues. Such an inconsistent team. Indiana and Wisconsin, very, very inconsistent teams. Wisconsin's favored at home by 25.5 over Illinois. I think Wisconsin wins big. I don't think Illinois is looking too hot. In our last game, Penn State 4-1, 1-1 in the Big Ten, travels to 2-4, 0-2 Michigan, with Michigan favored by 1, and an over/under of 41 points.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Michigan. I think, again, I liked them. I liked them against Minnesota, and they go.
Yeah.
But I like Rutgers.
At some point, you think they're going to beat Minnesota, they don't. You think they're going to beat Rutgers, they don't. You think they're going to beat Penn State.
I didn't think they were going to beat Rutgers.
You didn't. I did. I picked them over Rutgers and Minnesota.
No, I picked Rutgers, but they played actually better than I thought. I think Penn State sucks. I don't think Hackenberg, I think he fools some people because he looks so good. He's very mechanical.
Yeah.
Like if you were to grow a quarterback in a lab, I think you'd get Christian Hackenberg, but I don't think he is. I don't think he has the intangibles. I do, in a night game, this will be very interesting to see what the crowd is like in Ann Arbor.
Some of the students, I don't think it's going to work, but some of the students are trying some sort of boycott where at kickoff nobody's in the stands to make a statement, but then after kickoff or something, they all go into the stands to support the team.
That's dumb. Grow up, people.
But I do think it's interesting. I am curious to see how the crowd's going to be because apparently tickets are only like $37 on StubHub. That's pretty cheap.
It'll be interesting. I don't know. I just think fans in Ann Arbor are so spoiled. Whether you compare them to Lakers fans or Yankees fans or whoever. This is what you get when you are not satisfied with 8 and 9 win seasons and you chase more and more. And every once in a while, when you're trying to climb to the top, you're going to fall off the other side hard. And that's what happens.
That's a good line.
That sounds like I did just come up with that on the fly.
Good.
Yeah, it sounds like a Mark D'Antonio-ism. Maybe I'm I'm getting too much into football season here, but you're a Michigan student. Like the kids are trying hard. Just shut up and go to the game. And if they don't win, they don't win. But hey, man, I sat through some pretty bad Michigan State games. I've been to Cubs games where they're losing 15-1, and just shut up and go to the game. Who do you think you are? You know what I mean? It just bothers me.
Back to Hackenberg. He hasn't thrown a touchdown since week 2. He's gone 3 straight games without a touchdown pass. They got surprisingly destroyed at home by Northwestern 2 weeks ago, which really opened my eyes because I know this offensive line is bad. I didn't know it was that bad. And it'll be interesting because Michigan has had a decent pass rush if they can get to Hackenberg a lot. At the same time, Gary flippin' Nova passed for 400 yards on him. So if Gary Nova does that, what could Christian Hackenberg do? And I thought this Michigan defense had been pretty good, but then that Rutgers game was just like, what? Not all sorts of missed tackles, broken coverages.
Yeah. And
watching that game felt a lot like watching every 2012 MSU football game in that every single drive something went wrong. Someone dropped a ball, someone committed a penalty, and it killed the drive.
Look, and that's the week leading up to it. I mean, these guys can say all the right things. Oh, we're totally focused. But if you're saying what happened throughout that week going into the game didn't affect the preparation, you're lying. I mean, that's totally. You have these things in the back of your head. You can't totally tune them out. And I think that was that crazy week sort of piling up on everyone. And now that it's settled down for a little bit, I think they play well and I think they win.
And, of course, we credit Rutgers for having a great environment, and they end up storming the field to take all that goodwill away. Get off my lawn.
Yeah. Old man yells at
for this game, man, I have no idea anymore. Hackenberg, he looks bad, but Gary Nova looks good. Penn State's offensive line's a mess. I don't know if Michigan's offense will be able to move the ball against anybody because Penn State's got one of the best rushing defenses in the country so far this year. Remember, it was a year ago It might have been. Was it a year ago this weekend? Because I'm actually going to be in. I'm going to be in Maryland this weekend for a thing, and I was in Maryland a year ago when Penn State and Michigan played in that hilarious game.
Yeah.
The 27 carries for 27 yards for Fitz Toussaint. But this game, man, I have no idea. I'm gonna pick against Michigan just because I've been burned the last 2 times. I'll say Penn State wins this one like 21-17. I just have no clue how this is gonna go.
Yeah, I think Michigan 24-14.
Yeah, I mean it's weird. So, all right, before we wrap this up real quick, a couple of reader questions sent in. All right, we already touched the hernia talk. Don't got much more to add about Izzo's hernia.
Nope.
We got 2 of the same question here, basically saying Connor Cook and Tony Lippett have been, on point together. But do we see more guys get more looks this weekend? Or going forward, how important is that? Whether it's Mumphrey, Burbridge, Price. It's something I think MSU is not missing but needs a little bit more of in the passing game. And I think we saw them try it with Burbridge a bit in the last game. But receiving core-wise, how are you looking at that dynamic?
I think they're still in good shape. I mean, I think every team would love to have a wide receiver like Tony Lippett right now. He's got 7 touchdowns, which is 3rd in the nation, and he's not only have they had the bye week, but he's missed like the second half of 2 games. So I don't think that's a problem. You've got one receiver playing great, and you'll take that all the time. And they've got guys. I mean, Burbridge made some tough catches. Kings is getting in there. Haven't worked A.J. Troop in as much as I think they would like to. And Dave Warner said they'll try to, or excuse me, that was Terrence Samuel, wide receivers coach, said today they'd like to get Troop more involved. But no, the wide receiver is not a concern if I'm a Michigan State fan at all.
Okay, that's fair. I think it also sticks out because MSU hasn't had one guy stand above the rest since maybe Devin Thomas in 2007 when he broke the school record for catches. So I guess put Tony Lippett on the watch. But I don't think it's a case of Cook only looking at Lippett necessarily. I think it's one case of Lippett just being really good. So. But we'll see how they attack Purdue, because Purdue is a team that teams have thrown on a lot, so there might be a lot of pass attempts in this one. Last question from at Perdman Jr. Do you think D'Antonio will go for, and we kind of talked about this last week and a few weeks ago, but do you think there's any need or will MSU go for any style points given that Ohio State is probably the only ranked team remaining on the schedule? I don't think so. I will say I think Nebraska was a missed opportunity, though, to make a statement, because they finished, I think, 7 points behind Alabama in the coaches poll, one of the polls. So if they hold on to that game, if it's 27-3, if they get the pick six and it's 34-3, 9, whatever. I do think you probably would see MSU as the highest ranked one-loss team, but as it stands, they're not. And I don't think it's something worth worrying about yet. But I don't think MSU is going to go for any style points. But I do think Nebraska was a missed opportunity to get some style points. In the sense of getting some love for blowing out a ranked team.
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. It does seem like a missed opportunity, but at the same time, I don't think there's any scenario where at the end of the year Michigan State wins the Big Ten championship game, probably against Nebraska, because I think they win that division. But whoever it may be, I don't think there's any scenario where Michigan State wins the Big Ten championship game, doesn't get in, and we're looking back on, oh man, if they'd only held on to Nebraska, they'd be in. I don't think it's going to be an issue. And to answer the question, no. I mean, he will get. Of course. You go for it organically. I mean, you're beating Purdue. You're not gonna just start taking a knee. You're gonna try to run up the score organically.
I will say, if it is a game is in hand, I wouldn't be surprised if they keep the foot on the gas pedal a little bit, considering how some of these fourth quarters have gone.
Sure.
Not having any points again in the fourth quarter against Oregon or Nebraska, I do think they probably want to get them to finish games stronger.
Yeah, but he doesn't turn into Steve Spurrier overnight. There's no way they're ever going to run up the score in that sense.
No, and last comment here, with all the teams that fell, that was all great news for MSU. Even though Ole Miss and Mississippi State jumped MSU, had Notre Dame not gotten that late touchdown against Stanford, they'd be MSU would be even in better position. But it goes back to show that, when MSU lost to Oregon, a lot of people thought they were done. And we here and some other people said, no, they're not done. The whole season's out to go. I didn't expect, half the top 10 to fall in a single weekend, but teams are going to lose games. They're going to lose more games. You got Florida State, Notre Dame next week. You got Mississippi State, Auburn this week. More undefeated teams will fall, and MSU, as they keep winning, they will stay right there, maybe crawl up a little bit. As long as you win, you're good. So that's it from me. Dan, you got any final comments on this before you head off to West Lafayette this weekend?
No. I'm excited for the new season of American Horror Story in a new Modern Family tonight. Other than that, no thoughts.
All right. I got to go watch South Park. I missed that tonight. And I got to catch up on Gotham. Gotham has been a pretty good show. I've been pleasantly surprised at that. So last thing, again, if you haven't signed up for 24/7 VIP, do so. You can buy 1 month, get 2 months free. Highly recommend it for all the latest recruiting news and in-depth preview stories and the like. Again, on Twitter, I'm at Chris Vanini. He's at MSU Dan K. So for Dan Kilber, this is Chris Vanini saying we will see you guys next week. Take care.
See ya.